Does Monday at the office feel like a storm? Not with Microsoft Copilot. That feeling when Copilot gets everyone up to speed instantly? It's sunny again. When Copilot simplifies complex data so your teams can act, that sun's shining on a beach. And when Copilot uncovers hidden insights, you're on that beach with your people, and you find buried treasure. That's Microsoft Copilot. Learn more at Microsoft.com/AI for all.
Hello and welcome to Want to Hear Something Weird? A weekly weird podcast about weird stuff. I've been told I'm not allowed to say that this is by two weird people. I'm only allowed to speak for myself.
By who?
By you. I'm one of your hosts, Tom.
It's only okay if I say I'm weird.
What's your name?
My name is Laura.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks for having me on the pod. Tom, this week I thought it's time.
It's time for what?
That we cover the big one.
The big what?
The Bigfoot.
The Bigfoot. All right.
So Bigfoot is
everywhere right now. He's so
huge.
hot.
He's huge.
He is huge.
Mm-hmm. Bigfoot, there are so many stories and encounters that to choose from that I thought, how can I narrow this down into something that is digestible
manageable
and that would make sense?
Mm.
And fortunately, there were exactly 100 years ago in the year 1924.
Okay, so that was your deciding factor.
There were two events. And
just that
was
there
my
were two
deciding
that
factor.
happened 100 years ago.
Two, but two extremely interesting ones. And and they are very different.
Oh, all right.
So I thought we'll start there, and then in the future, plenty more Bigfoot stories to choose from.
So we'll start not at the beginning of Bigfoot, but
not at the
we'll
beginning
give ourselves
of
a
Bigfoot,
100-year.
but pretty monumental Bigfoot stories.
Okay, so in case we want to do all the Bigfoot stories in chronological order,
if we could do probably a 10-20 part series on Bigfoot if we really wanted to.
Yeah, there's a lot.
I don't know that anyone else would want that.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of Bigfoot stories out there, and I think for no other reason than the woods are scary.
Well,
you're
where
in the
is the
woods,
reason Bigfoot exists?
That the woods are scary, and that's why Bigfoot exists.
No. Is the reason that there's a lot of stories because Bigfoot exists.
Well, the reason the woods are scary is because we don't know for sure if Bigfoot exists or
That's
not.
right.
And anybody that tells you otherwise is lying to you. Unless they're saying he exists because they saw him.
And then...
Or her.
Yes. We'll get into that.
Okay.
But what are your... just before we even get in, what are your feelings about Bigfoot? Are you... In terms of all the cryptids...
Yeah.
That you could choose from.
Mm-hmm.
Where does Bigfoot sort of fall?
I think out of all the cryptids, I find Bigfoot in some ways the least interesting because he, in a lot of stories, is the most mundane. Just the idea that there's a missing link, there's something between apes and us that came about and it's somehow survived without us knowing, and it's still out there living. Now, there's like that version of Bigfoot that some people believe in, which it's a normal animal. We just have never found it. That's increasingly difficult.
It's a species that we have yet to discover.
An undiscovered species. Mm-hmm. And people point out that like silverback gorillas, I think were only discovered maybe like 100 years ago, maybe even less than that. And they were kind of like a rumor before then.
Well, you could argue Bigfoot's a rumor.
I could argue. Well, yeah, I think he is a rumor. He's not a real guy, but silverback gorillas are real because we eventually found them and documented them. I think the idea that Bigfoot is a missing link, a normal creature that we've somehow just never found and never found the bones of, is increasingly unlikely in our modern day, where
with cameras everywhere,
higher
population densities,
us going into us humans going into places we haven't been to before, taking over, land that used to be wild, that there would be more evidence. Now there is an increasing movement towards the idea that Bigfoot is not necessarily a cryptid, not necessarily a animal that a species that hasn't been discovered, that there is a paranormal aspect of Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
Now there are people that think Bigfoot is the ghost of a Cro-Magnon man or a Neanderthal. That, or not just one, I guess many, which kind of makes sense. If you think ghosts exist, then why couldn't Neanderthals have ghosts?
Theory.
Yeah, that's out there. It might be one that I came up with, but it's out there.
It's one you thought about.
There are people that think Bigfoot is from another dimension, that he's coming through portals or coming through shifts in the dimension somehow. There are a lot of Bigfoot sightings that happen around UFO sightings, which is also very strange. So some people think Bigfoot might be an alien. Maybe, I don't know, the Han Solo had Chewbacca helping him out. Maybe that's the deal here. They got a Bigfoot, and just like Chewie, they'd be like, go outside, I'm going to stay in the ship. You go outside and, change out the filters or whatever. And maybe that's why Bigfoot gets seen, because he's out there trying to fix the broken down UFO.
And then there's also some people think that it's just humans dressed up in gorilla suits.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Or bears, mistaken for something else.
And I think that's the thing with something like Bigfoot. Undoubtedly, a certain percent, and probably a pretty large percent of any sightings are going to be fakes. Excuse me, because it's very, you put on you rent a gorilla suit from the Halloween store. You just go hide where, next to a trail or whatever. And boom, instant viral content. And yeah, bears. Like if I saw a bear standing up in the woods, probably my first thought would be, oh my God, it's Bigfoot.
Yeah. And then your second thought was, oh shit, it's a bear standing
it's a bear.
up in
It's
the
worse.
woods.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be scared of it either way.
Right.
So how many times has somebody run away from something hairy in the woods that they half saw and just told maybe people that hadn't seen a bear in real life and said, it was a Bigfoot, because they didn't know any different.
Right. I think Bigfoot is one of my favorite cryptids.
Yeah.
Because of the mundane.
Because it's like the most plausible, the most realistic. So.
Well,
because
I think because it makes sense.
What are you gonna say? It makes sense. It just makes sense. There's gonna be some Bigfoots out there roaming the hills.
But I don't know, and I think that, well, it just seems fun. I don't know, but Bigfoot seems fun. Like a fun one.
mean, look, he's not. I'm just saying. Look, he
also,
might be
you're less likely to just run into Bigfoot during the course of your day, whereas some other ones like Mothman, you're driving down a highway and you could jump out.
Well, I was gonna say, I think probably my favorite cryptid is Mothman.
I know it is,
but Mothman. Nothing makes sense about that guy.
Yeah. Well, this is a Bigfoot episode.
I'm just saying nobody's out there saying,
we'll do an episode about Mothman.
Maybe some moth evolved into a man and we've never found it. No, nobody's out there like, look, Mothman is a whole other level. Leave him alone if you can.
Okay. So I have two stories from 1920.
Two stories. It's like the real world. But it's true stories when they say it.
Okay.
I'll be quiet for a few minutes.
Thanks for that. Okay. First story, 1924. Albert Ostman. So we are in the Toba Inlet region of British Columbia, which is north of Vancouver. It's
so on the west coast.
On the west coast
of North America.
And Pacific Northwest. It's still, part of
that's Bigfoot's stomping grounds.
That's prime.
That's where the
Bigfoot
most sightings
location.
have happened. Yeah.
And It's north of Vancouver, although it's pretty far north. It's a pretty remote location. So Albert Ostman was a lumberjack and a woodsman, so he's someone that very comfortable in the woods.
Yeah.
Couldn't say the same for myself. He went camping just as a vacation, and he had heard stories about, quote, man beasts that had supposedly roamed these woods.
Okay.
But he didn't believe them.
Right.
It's like, man beasts.
Man beasts.
Whatever. You hear a lot of stories.
Yeah.
As a lumberjack, I'm sure. So he's not a believer in the lore. And it's not
he's
really
trying to get the bag. He's trying to make that money.
right. Well, I mean, he's just on vacation.
Oh yeah, he was. I forgot about that part. I guess he was on vacation. Look, he wants vacation ruined. All right.
Yeah.
If I was going to go on vacation and somebody said to me before I left, there's man beasts there, I'd be like, okay, these tickets are non-refundable.
Tickets to the campground?
Yeah, a campground reservation can be very hard to get.
I don't know, in 1924?
Probably not. He probably didn't have it. He probably just walked into the woods and said, this looks good.
But also, 1924 was really before the term Bigfoot or Sasquatch was.
There weren't many stories out there in pop culture about this.
It's just it didn't take off, like the term Bigfoot hadn't taken off, so it wasn't. So yeah, that's why they're referring to this as a man beast at this point. So he's there for a little while. One night while he slept, a Bigfoot picked him up and carried him off while he was in his sleeping bag.
While he was asleep?
While he was in his sleeping bag.
Okay. So it's like a cartoon Bigfoot. It's just going to carry this sleeping lumberjack who doesn't notice he's being carried away.
Well, I mean, he woke up.
Okay.
He woke up when he got picked up. Yeah. And Bigfoot slung Albert over its shoulder.
Okay.
And carried him on a long hike.
Oh. And this guy just went along with it? He wasn't like, hey.
He didn't report to fight back. The hike was reportedly 3 hours.
That's a long hike, even for Bigfoot.
I do have questions about that. How did you know it was 3 hours? You had a watch on you?
Maybe.
But yeah, he took him a very, very far distance. And he's just slung over the shoulders, and Bigfoot is big, and Albert's, a normal sized man. So
yeah, he couldn't get away from him.
Couldn't really escape. Bigfoot took him to
Red Lobster.
That'd be a nice date.
And he wasn't mad.
Albert was
fine.
He's like, actually, I've been running out of food.
I haven't been eating so good in the woods here, so this would be nice. And it is a shrimp fest, so
Lobster fest.
Lobster. There's shrimp fest.
Oh, well, see, I'm not
up on it. You don't even eat fish. I'm not
up on the.
It's like you know more
marketing
about
of
Red Lobster than me.
I think Lobster Fest is the better known.
No. Absolutely not.
Okay.
Shrimp fest.
I'll take it back. A weigh in if you. No, like Tom said, I don't eat that stuff, so I've never partaken. So Bigfoot took Albert to a camp where there were 3 other Sasquatch.
Oh, boy.
4 total.
4 total Sasquatches.
And it was the older man, which was the kidnapper.
Okay.
An older woman.
His wife.
How could he tell it was a woman? Unclear. No real description on that. Yeah. But yes, his wife. Bigfoot, not sure if they were legally married. What'd you say?
Bigfoot boobies. He could have.
Okay.
I don't know. Look, I don't know how hairy these guys are. If you can kind of see through the hair what's going on.
Okay. And then 2 younger Sasquatch, which was the children.
Right.
So a nice little Sasquatch Bigfoot family.
Yeah. Who were planning on eating him.
So he was held captive for 6 days.
That's a long time.
and they fed him sweet grass.
Oh, okay.
He described the female Sasquatch as, preparing food and vegetation, so like washing and stacking leaves, describing it as very human-like.
Right.
He had a gun on him.
Oh, okay. But didn't want to use it.
But didn't want to use it because he did not feel threatened by the Bigfoot family.
Yeah, they just wanted him to be part of their family, it sounds like.
They were worried about him out in the woods all by himself. Hey, come back.
Come hang out with me and
grass.
my Bigfoot family. Have some sweet grass.
I definitely get more of a Harry and the Hendersons vibe from this family than...
I mean, the Hendersons were regular people.
Well, right, Harry.
Yeah,
specifically.
He was the
He was not.
Bigfoot.
He was not a human, but a friendly Bigfoot. So yeah, Albert didn't use his gun. He didn't feel threatened by them. But he did have, so in his sleeping bag, he had a pack of supplies that he kept in it. So, when that Bigfoot picked him up and carried him off, it was with him. Yeah. And it included coffee and snuff.
Okay.
So he would make coffee each morning. And it was, something that the Sasquatch were fascinated to watch him do.
But they
make the coffee. They didn't have any, but they would also watch him. He would like take put the snuff in his mouth, and they would just watch him curiously.
Like what is that about?
What is this little man doing?
Look at this funny little guy Dad brought home.
Finally, on the 6th day, the older Sasquatch grabbed the snuff and ate all of it, which made him ill.
Oh, yeah, you can't do that.
And the rest of his family attended to him while Albert was managed to escape.
Yeah, that's probably a good time to get out of there.
I thought, 6 days, it's time to go. Yeah. So Albert made it out of there fine, and then did not tell this story until 1957.
Wow.
So many years later, because he thought people would think he was crazy.
Yeah. And what changed in the 50s that he thought?
So there was a lot more stories
talking about it.
Of people talking about these Bigfoot creatures, and he was finally, felt like, okay, it's my time to actually share that this had happened to me.
My week with a Bigfoot family.
Yeah, my vacation with the Bigfoot family. I wonder if they ever.
I think if a Bigfoot kidnapped me, I wouldn't wait 30 years to tell people. I'd probably be telling people all the time. That would be like that'd be the story I dined out on.
Okay.
People would introduce me as, have you met my friend Tom? He once vacationed with a family of Bigfoots for 6 days until the big one ate his snuff and almost died from it, so he ran away.
I don't know.
And then I would say, pleasure, I'm sure. As I shook their hand.
I don't know if Bigfoot is such a cultural icon.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just such a part of our culture now that everyone knows what a Bigfoot is, or vaguely at least. It's very different now. 100 years ago, I
think nowadays you can't come back and say I spent a week with a family of Bigfoots and everybody will be like, oh yeah, Bigfoot's big now.
I mean, that's true.
Well, I know what Bigfoot is, so I believe that. But if I didn't know what Bigfoot was, boy, I would not buy that for a second.
I don't know what the point is I'm trying to make.
Okay.
Fair enough. Yeah. So that was Albert Offsman's encounter in 1924.
You said you had another 1924 encounter.
I have another 1924 encounter. So this time, very different.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're in Mount St. Helens, which is in Washington State.
Okay.
So once again,
further south
Pacific
from where we
Northwest.
were, but still pretty north and pretty west, pretty northwest.
we're in the summer of 1924, and 5 gold miners.
Okay.
I was going to say gold diggers, but
Right. Yeah, they don't, yeah, they're minors.
Fred Beck, Gabe Lefever, John Peterson, Marion Smith, and Smith's son, Roy.
Okay.
All were staying.
So what is that, a family and then like
It's a group of.
couple of weirdos?
They're just, they all just work together,
Okay.
except for Smith and his son.
Oh, I thought her last name was Smith too. She's
Marion, I believe, is a man.
Oh, Marion. Okay, I get it.
Yeah. So 4 older guys and then a son, a boy.
There's like that
Young man.
that riddle about I can't operate on this boy. This boy's my son.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this one's like.
That's exactly what happens. No. Okay, so we're at Mount St. Helens in Washington, which is outside of the Seattle area.
Mm-hmm.
And they all stay at this cabin. Now, it sounds like either all of them or one of them owns this cabin.
Okay.
It's not a vacation situation. They're there to look for gold.
Right. So yeah,
they're working.
Probably like a pretty small utilitarian cabin, just there for shelter.
Right.
No real amenities.
Yeah. And the one day they run into what they call gorilla men or ape men. Once again, we don't really have the Bigfoot term.
Right. They're using the best they can.
They ran into a few of them, and they describe them as having human-like strides. They called them giant animals moving through the forest with human-like strides. They were covered in long black hair.
Okay.
And this has all been, we have a record of this because the Oregonian published
an account of it
that summer. So pretty immediately after it happened. Their ears were about 4 inches long and stick straight up.
Interesting. These sound more like dog men.
Or bunny men. They have 4 toes that are short and stubby. Each, if they had to guess, was about 400 pounds.
Okay.
And
big boys.
Anywhere between like 7 and 8 feet tall.
Okay.
So they're obviously quite startled. And Fred Beck fired his rifle at one of the creatures, which struck 3 times and wounded it, toppling it off of a cliff.
Oh, no.
So this Sasquatch falls off of a cliff.
Yeah, he's just minding his own business.
Now, as a side note, Fred Beck, many years later, claimed that somebody else had actually fired the shot. He didn't want to be responsible.
Nice try,
for
Fred.
it. But as you can imagine, these other Sasquatch witnessed this.
Yeah, and probably weren't too happy.
And it was a big mistake.
Yeah.
So the Sasquatch run off, and the rest of the guys go back to the cabin.
That Sasquatch must have been walking pretty close to the edge of the cliff.
Yeah.
It's unsafe.
Dangerous. Ask him for
I think he'd be used to, living in the woods. Don't walk too close to the edge of a cliff.
Yeah.
Just in case some gold miner tries to shoot you and does, and you fall off the cliff, and your Bigfoot friends have to witness it.
And that night, so they all return back to the cabin. That night, they're all asleep.
Yeah.
They are awakened when huge rocks and stones started to hit the outside of the cabin.
So I've heard a lot of stories about Bigfoots throwing rocks.
I think that this is really the beginning of that.
Oh, okay. This is where they learned it from.
They also heard and felt their Sasquatch or Bigfoot bodies slamming against the outside of the cabin. They were there to seek revenge. They were pissed.
Yeah.
They had just, lost one of their own. At one point, one of them allegedly, there was some kind of a hole in the construction in the wall, and one of the Bigfoot managed to reach their hand inside, took hold of an axe, and was trying to pull it out, but one of the guys inside managed to like knock it out of his hand.
That's a close one.
Eventually, so this has sort of become chaos, and this is lasting for a good long while. This sort of conflict ensues.
These Bigfoot, they're there for the revenge. They're not gonna be easily deterred.
No, and there are 5 men, and I think they didn't say exactly how many, but there were 4 initially, and one fell off a cliff. So
right.
Simple math says 3 is left.
Taking the minor side, one fell off a cliff. He shot him off the cliff.
Shot him off a cliff.
So probably 3 Bigfoot looking for revenge.
Yeah. Pretty frightening if you ask me.
Yeah.
They eventually tore a hole in the roof.
Wow.
And threw rocks like into the cabin. One of them hit Beck, who was the guy that shot the Bigfoot.
Revenge.
And he ended up being unconscious for a couple of hours. Like it hit him pretty bad. Finally, the sun came up and the Bigfoot ran off.
Yeah.
They ended up going back to the local community at this point, civilization, and immediately reported it. They told a couple of some park rangers decided, okay, let's investigate what these claims are, because this group of guys just came back hysterical about having had a all-night battle with a group of Sasquatch, Bigfoot, or ape men. So they weren't the very first people to have reported anything like this in the area.
Okay.
There had been big footprints that had been spotted, and then of course, indigenous communities,
they had stories about
exactly. So, the park rangers,
they were like, one thing they don't like, shooting them and making them fall off cliffs.
Yeah, don't do that. It's not recommended. So these park rangers decide to go investigate, and so they hike into the forest with Beck, who's sort of, by this point you can tell he's like sort of the front runner.
Yeah. Well,
here.
He's the one who shot him. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
and then he's the one who got hurt. So yeah. Because see, at this point, if I was one of his friends, I'd be like, all right, you know what? I didn't hurt any Bigfoot. They didn't hurt me. I'm tapping out at this point.
I've had enough.
You go with the park rangers.
So they took him. So he took them. There were 2 park rangers he took them to. He took with him up to where they had been. He took them to the cliff where the wounded ape man fell off the cliff. So one of the park rangers scrambled down to the supposedly inaccessible canyon and found nothing. That's a quote from the Oregonian. Now, you could argue if they're interdimensional beings.
Yeah, that might just send him back to his own dimension.
Yeah.
Or maybe it didn't kill him and that Bigfoot got up and ran away.
Yeah.
Started a new family.
Maybe he's picking up campers.
Yeah.
Carrying them back.
3 hours.
Moved up to Canada,
Yeah, just kept going north.
So he then showed the rangers the cabin, and the rangers, they did see a lot of rocks and damage, but they just weren't buying it, and they just thought, the men did this.
Yeah, you guys got drunk or whatever.
Yeah, and got rowdy, and you're just kind of like making this
Blame
up for
it on
attention
Bigfoot.
or something. Yeah. There was a big footprint.
Okay.
But the park rangers thought, nah.
They
created that with their hands. Yeah, they created it with their hands and the palms of their hands or something. But this story ended up really being the first of what really set off like
the Bigfoot mania.
Bigfoot mania, but specifically in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This is really like the first big story that kind of
Yeah, I mean, the Oregonian's still around today, right? So,
Mhm.
yeah.
So,
Well, there you have it. Not the origins of Bigfoot, but the Pacific Northwest-ish modern day origins of Bigfoot.
indeed. Not the first, but
Did these stories make you believe in Bigfoot more or less? I mean, these both the first one's a little crazy, but the second one, the second one sounds like what would happen if you came across 4 gorillas and did that.
right.
Like that gorillas are smart enough and care enough about each other that they would seek out revenge against you and, just throw rocks and.
Right. One of the theories was that it was a group of teenagers.
Okay.
I don't know how the men would mix that up.
They could have been mountain teens.
But it was dark and they, couldn't see. And
yeah. I feel like teenagers were scragglier back then.
Yeah, I don't think you could
They
possibly think they were an 8-foot
they weren't. They weren't giving them milk with all the hormones in it like we do now. All right. Well, 2 weird stories about Bigfoot. Look, Bigfoot's growing on me now.
Oh,
Thanks to
good.
these stories. I'm finding him more interesting, more fascinating.
Well, there's a lot of stories
Yeah.
out there. These are just the 2 that happened to happen in 1924.
All right. Well, and we'll be working through year by year.
Tune in next week for part 2. No, I'm kidding.
In 1925. But speaking of which, if you like the show, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. 5-star reviews help little shows like ours get noticed. You can follow us on social media at WannaHearPod on most social media platforms. You can email us, wannahearpod@gmail.com. We do have some good listener mail that we just haven't had time to get to yet, but we will be. And you can keep sending us those listener mails. We like that. And we'll be covering them in a future episode. All right. Well, that's it for this week.
Thanks for listening.
I was going to try and say goodbye in Bigfoot, but I don't even know what that.
I heard a little Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, well, he's a little Bigfootish. All right, we'll see you next week.
Want to Hear Something Weird is a Clamor audio production, distributed by the Cloud 10 Network. Hosted and executive produced by Tom Reynolds and me, Laura Anderson. Executive produced by Aaron Hilliard.
Clamor General Manager Rich Statter, Associate Producer Ethan Aronson, Post-Production Supervised by Devin Ruskin, Production Assistant Samara Mullick. Special thanks to Sim Sarna and Saiba Krieger at Cloud 10.